So I was debating whether I was gonna do a video on this, but then I saw this video.
Back in the kitchen, this time we are cooking okra soup. Ingredients lined up: smoked catfish, stockfish, the ground crayfish, the periwinkle.
And then I was like, yeah, I have to do this video because someone has to speak on it, or there just needs to be more public discourse on it as a whole. Recently in the entertainment industry, there have been many exposures occurring with people being outed for their dealings in SA and other forms of abuse, and we are seeing some individuals receiving that retribution for their actions, but then there are cases when the penalty isn't as heavy, or there isn't really a penalty at all, you could say. And at this current time, I would say that that is the case for Tim Westwood. The noise regarding him hasn't been that imposing lately, considering the announcement of the accusations that were brought up against him initially 4 years ago and then brought up again 2 years ago from now. But to me, even before these allegations were announced, he's always been one of the most peculiar existences within black British spaces, or black spaces as a whole, ever since I first acknowledged him. His whole existence within UK rap and hip hop was just very bizarre to me, and I was aware of his contributions in terms of bridging the gap between the UK and the US scene and attracting US superstars over here, having to go through him if they were keen in terms of increasing their access to the UK market, essentially establishing himself in the position of being a UK gatekeeper. But some of his behaviour, very questionable to put it shortly. From the way he generally speaks during interviews and introduces guests and claim it as him speaking how someone in hip hop would speak, to his very off-putting interviews with black female artists and some comments that he's made during his live performances. His whole persona was just incredibly dubious. And with what we know about him regarding the allegations and the BBC providing a documentary giving the testimonies, I want to revisit the timeline of his career which provided him that validity within the culture, but I also want to touch on some concerns that I and probably a lot of other people had from the jump about his intentions possibly being insincere. So Westwood's upbringing was spent both in Lowestoft and later on in Norwich, and is known to be the son of a parish priest. There aren't too many other significant details regarding his childhood which, knowing his character, is kind of fitting, but it's quite well known that he comes from a middle class background. His entry into DJing came through him supporting sound systems, helping set up their equipment, and before events would start, he'd get on the decks himself and start doing starter sets before anyone would actually turn up, essentially just practicing. He would begin on pirate radio shows, but would then get his first commercial gig doing the Capital Rap Show on Capital FM in the late 1980s. Broadcasting the latest songs emerging from the hip hop scene allowed him to network with some of the biggest DJs across the pond, most notably Funkmaster Flex. Their relationship was so close he even welcomed Westwood into the Big Dog Pitbull Collective, which was a DJ group very well known for receiving all the latest exclusive releases within hip hop. Some people believe that this connection and the beginning of him being a lot more included within the culture and the acknowledgement from Funk Flex was what started and what made him a lot more comfortable to put on that forced, dreaded black accent that, you know, he's known for putting on. Clear attempts of him trying to sound a bit more familiar with and entrenched in hip hop culture whilst trying to emulate Funkmaster Flex and his peers. Nevertheless, his major interest and eagerness in the genre led him to become this highly admired music figure amongst US artists, and eventually these connections made will be brought to the UK. As he moved to BBC Radio 1 to host another rap show, its launch in 1994 consisted of a live show featuring both Biggie Smalls and He Who Shall Not Be Named. Yeah. After the success of the Radio 1 show, he then had a stint with MTV hosting the UK version of Hit My Rad during 2005 to 2007. He eventually left the BBC in 2013 and joined Capital One Extra, where he continued broadcasting artist interviews and freestyles for UK, US artists and even international acts. All of these clips going on his separate YouTube channel Tim Westwood TV, where he'd also begin the series called Crib Sessions, which was very, very popular when drill was in its prime. This is probably a time where people who are my age or similar were first introduced to Tim Westwood. I can only imagine everyone's first reaction to watching a Crib Session, because to me, I was hella confused first time I saw it. I was like, how can my man be chilling with them man and them man in the same room together? Like, yeah, I was mad. Aside from that, he's won multiple mobile awards ranging from the years 2000 to 2008, as well as winning a GRM award in 2016. So from the profile and background provided, for the most part, you'd be reasonable in thinking that this is an esteemed, well-respected individual who's done a lot in terms of pushing the culture forward through his live events and his time at radio. However, some of his strange behaviour alongside some heinous activity that was properly revealed late in his career will completely tarnish this legacy that he was building for himself. So the first bit of questionable activity, and it's not that bad, but it's something that I always just found that perplexing, was the voice he put on, because it was so bad, bro. Like, I'm being so serious. The voice that he put on was basically him impersonating what he perceived to be someone who is well versed in hip hop culture, and it's something that's been a very key talking point for the majority of his career.
The way you talk, your mannerisms,
yeah, but
the way
you talk, my brother, it's like I live this, man.
Right.
This is me, man. This is what I do. I'm a friggin' hip hop DJ. How am I meant to talk?
I agree.
Like, how am I meant to rip down a club? Am I meant to sound like anything different? Can't apologise for being white. Can't.
In the same video, he raised the counter argument, bringing up the example of Trevor McDonald, who was a famous Caribbean news presenter and was known apparently for having a strong Caribbean accent. However, when it was time to present on the news, he was only speaking in meticulous, flawless English. Despite the presenter not being of British origin, he's allowed to speak in a very posh accent. So Westwood is now wondering and raising this rhetorical question of why it can't be the same case for him. How on earth is somebody supposed to speak in the culture of hip hop? I don't know, maybe just speaking normally, how you'd usually speak at home, you know? I think that's a great suggestion. Speak how you actually speak, as opposed to just clearly impersonating. Like, obviously this is not a deep thing, but it's just something that, why was he talking like that? His argument was really one of the weakest cop-outs and excuses that I've heard, and also just completely ignores the historical impact of colonization, as the standards that are set within professional spaces kind of require for people to speak improper English, because speaking your local dialect is not considered professional. Similar issue with hair discrimination, which a lot of black people may experience at their workplace for the same reasons. Whereas in any type of cultural creative field which may involve black culture, there is no official standard for how someone is supposed to present themselves or how someone is supposed to speak. You can be passionate about the culture and simultaneously just be yourself. Like, it's mad now. Like, very horrid excuse trying to exempt himself from being seen as appropriating, when really it was probably a voice that was just put on to try and disguise his actual background, and I don't think it was executed the best, because at most times it just came across as quite cringe. The next concerning thing with him was the way that he conducted his interviews, especially with his female guests. Tim was already known for being this lively, audacious character to most people and possessing a presence that was larger than life even at his old age. Then there'll be some occurrences where he'd arguably crossed the line with this act. Some examples include when he asked Megan Thee Stallion wig or weave.
Your hair looks amazing.
Thank you.
Wig or weave?
Not your business.
Oh, for real?
The obsession with black hair continues in the interview with Cardi B, where he's asking how many inches she likes in terms of the hair length that she goes for, or when he asks what type of weave that she's into. I don't know, when he just, yeah. And then for the other parts of the interview, he's kind of hitting on Cardi B, but masking it under this guise of him being a very harmless old white man who's obviously joking and is just trying to, you know, speak ignorantly for the sake of bars and attention and clicks. The little insinuations do not stop there and stem even further, as in an interview with Nicki Minaj in 2010, he suggested Nicki that she should sit on his lap whilst they look for a chair for her, because there wasn't one in the room at the time. So you can think that that's playful or jokey or whatever, but hey man, nah. And again, it's very obvious the character that he's trying to play, but especially later in his career, it all just kind of came across as kind of awkward, quite peculiar, and borderline disrespectful. The male artist interviews aren't really as awkward, but are still not an easy watch by any means. If you watch his interview with the younger OFB lot, it is literally just an exchange of yeah mans, because how exactly is an interviewer at the ripe age of 60 supposed to relate to guys who are in their late teens, early 20s? It makes no sense. I have no clue how they allow them to keep doing those interviews, but that's not for me to come and explain. But it doesn't stop there, because on top of all of the things that I mentioned in this video, there's also allegations against him saying very derogatory, off-putting comments at Fresh's motives. This isn't something that I mentioned earlier in the video, but Tim Westwood has also been known for putting on events for the youth, whether it be like 14 to 16 events or uni motives. He's been doing this since like the early 2000s, and it's been rumored or alleged at these events that he's been continuing this inappropriate behavior, whether it's touching girls inappropriately or saying comments towards girls along the lines of "I'll have you any day," just insane stuff. I think the worst thing about all of this though is the constant defense for all of this behavior, as in a report, spokespeople must have said that he wasn't actually saying things directly to anyone, and he wasn't insinuating or hinting anything. He was just making jokes or non-offensive banter referencing the reggae lyrics that he was playing. Because he's got such an infatuation with reggae and his stuff that he regularly plays at his events, no one should take what he says seriously. It's all just entertainment. Just an obvious job of infantilizing his behavior to keep his image intact, as opposed to actually holding him accountable for his actions. He's always had like a weird proximity to youth culture, despite him being 30 or 40 years senior the people that he's entertaining. But even with all of these rumors swirling around throughout his career, especially when he caught mainstream attention, it never really stopped him until that report dropped from The Guardian in 2022. In April of 2022, it was officially announced that Tim Westwood was accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. In the initial report, 3 women accused him of predatory behavior and 4 women accused him of touching them inappropriately. All of these accusations were non-recent and allegedly occurred along the time span ranging from 1992 to 2017. Westwood then stepped down from his role at Capital Extra, but him and his representatives have strongly denied these allegations since they were first announced. And there's been ongoing investigations looking further into these accusations and independent reviews looking into his employment at the BBC to check whether there were any other people within the company who were aware of his situation whilst he was employed there. A file of evidence was recently sent to the Crown Prosecution Service and they claim to thoroughly look into these offences. And whilst a lot of people are probably hoping that this case is taken seriously by the CPS, I feel like there should be a conversation regarding the corporations that employed him failing to address this matter in-house all those years. With these rumours having circulated about him being a potential predator for the longest of times, I don't know how they managed to allow him to work just as normal without looking into the talk themselves. Because in all of that time that everyone was speculating, they only provided him more time to solidify his name as a key contributor to Black British culture and continue to earn from his live performances. The BBC documentary was very informative, sharing the testimonies of the women and allowing them to speak openly about their experiences, but there wasn't any explanation for how he was monitored whilst he was there, which is a shame, and also a decision to not elaborate on whether they received complaints about him or not, so that was also a bit shady. It could be down to legal issues why they couldn't disclose such info, because according to some reports, it's been advised by the Met Police that any independent reports on this Tim Westwood case should be delayed, as if they were to be released now and made available to the public, they could potentially be interfering with justice being reached. The only other concerning thing was just the lack of noise from other people within the industry speaking out when the rumors surrounding Tim Westwood broke out initially, aside from Ty the rapper, who briefly gave his thoughts on Tim Westwood in a podcast episode.
Westwood is a problem, and I'm gonna say this now, right? So people can understand. Like, some people are like, "Oh, you just hate him." No, people have died because of Westwood. Let's get clear on that. Yeah, people have died.
Bruv, this is a serious.
Yes, people have died. The people have been beaten up. There's artists that have been beaten up because Westwood has sent certain people to do certain things. You know, people should challenge him on these things.
And as of today, as you can see from the vid that I included at the beginning of this video, he's currently in Nigeria, still doing club performances, still doing live events. And if you do a little bit of research, he's also going to be performing in the UK once again. He's scheduled to perform, I think it's Birmingham, late November, as well as Lewisham. So yeah. Now, I don't know how advisable it is to have someone who's been publicly accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women within those club type environments to still be even within the vicinity of those places, let alone headlining and performing there, but what do I know? Tim Westwood portrayed himself to be someone who had a deep-rooted infatuation with black music and is someone who defended the music's place within the mainstream music model. He brought exposure to many artists trying to make it and also tightened the relationship between both the UK and the US music scenes. With all of this being achieved, however, came with a lot of power and put him in a position to potentially act on any other ill intentions that he may have had. Whether that be to revel in the lavishness of the lifestyle that being a music DJ offered him, especially at the scale that he reached, or through the validity that he received from other respected members of music to adopt the same vernacular or behave in a manner that he perceived to be what it meant to be part of black culture. But worst of all, leveraging his power within the industry to exploit the vulnerability of black women and explore further this fetishization of his within a space that was predominantly black. His stay within black music is one that should make us a lot more wary of who we put to be the representatives of black music and question whether their intentions are truly genuine. The conversation of black women's reports of their own tragedies being held in a low regard is also something that should be at the forefront. It being only 2 years ago for legal action to actually be taken is very overdue, and even with that legal action, then Westwood still has the opportunity to thrive and make a living within another country amidst the allegations that he's facing. Despite the multiple hashtags and online discourses that have been held of people expressing their negative experiences with the man and what they've seen him do, my thoughts are with the women who shared their experiences and anyone who's had a negative encounter with him generally. And yeah, man, that's really all I got to say on this particular issue. If you found this video informative, like it, subscribe, share it, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one.